All right. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's virtual field trip brought to you by Learn Around the World. If this is your first experience on a Learn Around the World virtual field trip, this is interactive for you. Everyone out there today, if you're on camera with us or if you're watching from off of camera, you can send in your questions early and often, and we recommend that you do so using the Q&A app in the bottom of your Zoom window, or teachers, if you use Twitter, you can use the hashtag GEOshow. Only use the hashtag GEOshow. Do not at me or I will not see your question. I repeat, I will not see your question if you do not use the hashtag GEOshow if you choose to use Twitter. Also, play along with our survey questions and our quiz at the end of the show using Kahoot. You can go to kahoot.it, enter in today's game pin 9105498 to play along with our interactive programming. All right, if you win our Geo Quiz at the end of the show, Explorers, you'll win a postcard from me, GeoB, from the Learn Around the World studio. Also, if you stump me on any questions, I don't know everything there is to know and all facts about these natural wonders we'll be seeing today, but if I need to do further research, I'll post those answers over at flipgrid.com/GeoShow. Feel free to share your research about Mexico there as well. Use it as your platform to share. Okay, it's that time of the day, Explorers, but I want to know first, are you guys ready? Yeah! All right, let's do it. GeoShow's now live. All right. Welcome all Explorers. You're now watching the Geo Show, and the title of today's program is Natural Wonders of Southern Mexico, brought to you by Learn Around the World. We're kicking off today's show with our first survey question. So if you're playing along and you have devices, go ahead and grab them and get logged in over at kahoot.it or the Kahoot app using the game pin 9105198. If you haven't gotten it yet, you can check your chat box, teachers. I put that pin there as well. Don't worry if you're not logged in yet and it's taken some time. We're not going to start giving points into the end of the show. These first questions are survey questions. Now, the way we use it on the Geo Show is you only get 10 seconds to answer, so not a lot of time, Explorers. Also, if you've never used Kahoot, you must look up here at the screen where you see me right now. This is where you're going to see the questions and the answers. Don't look right down at your devices. You will only see color buttons down here to answer with. Okay, well, let's go ahead and practice and test it out. So go ahead and grab your devices if you're playing along. Our first survey question today is, we are going to Mexico on our virtual field trip. But I want to know from all of you, where is Mexico? Where is it? What part of the world? Is it in red Africa, blue North America, yellow South America, or green Europe? All right, it is blue North America. So remember, North America actually goes from Canada all the way down to Panama. So Mexico is included in that, even though it's south. Most of you, if you're watching from the United States. If you don't know exactly where it is, well, let's check it out and see what locations we are going to in Mexico today. Mexico is a very large country. As we spin our big blue ball around, we're all zooming around Space Zone, and we're going to zoom in to the U.S.'s closest neighbor to the south, and we're going to zoom into the locations we are headed to in southern Mexico. Again, Mexico is a very big country, just like the U.S., for example. So we are not going to learn about all of the natural wonders found here. There's just too many. But we are going to focus on 3 today. And to do that, we're going to visit the state of Oaxaca on the western side of southern Mexico. Oaxaca is a state, so they have states, not provinces. And if we zoom in, one of our locations today is Hierve el Agua, which means boiling water. And another location, so we're visiting two different areas, is Arbol del Tule in Oaxaca. We'll also be visiting the eastern parts of southern Mexico, which is the Yucatan Peninsula, and one of the many natural wonders that is found there, there's lots of these, they're called cenotes. So we'll see a number of different types of cenotes. There's 3 different types or kinds. We'll see all of those different kinds. One of those areas that we'll be traveling to is in the upper part of our screen. This is where Dos Ojos is located. So we're going to visit that one today. And we're also going to visit an open cenote that is close to the ocean. And these aren't the exact one that we'll be visiting. But when we look at them from the sky, it just looks like a big pool. Well, something to keep in mind about this area of the world is that the bedrock, that means if you dig down far enough and you get past soil, you hit rock. Okay, so the bedrock in the Yucatan is something called limestone. And limestone dissolves, many of the minerals in limestone, we're going to talk about this today, dissolves in water. And so it's kind of like a big sponge. So some of this ocean water, some of these open cenotes, ocean water can actually go back and forth underground between these cenotes, some of them. And because of that, some of these cenotes are actually saltwater and not freshwater. And we're going to learn all about cenotes, Arbol del Tule, and Hierve el Agua on today's Geo Show. So these are our locations on the map. All right, so before we get into it, we do want to introduce our on-camera guest classroom we have with us. So we have Mrs. Hood's 5th graders from Hatboro, Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, guys. All right, and I know we were last minute bump up. Do we happen to have any fun facts about Mexico today?
Not yet.
Okay, that's all right. Well, go ahead and start getting your questions ready for when we come back to you guys. We also have lots of classrooms watching from off of camera today, and we do give a couple of random shout outs today. Let's go ahead and start off. Let's give a shout out to Island Montessori School down in Wilmington, North Carolina, and let's give another one, why not, to, let's see, Midview North Elementary, watching from Ohio. Welcome to everyone watching today from all over the U.S. and beyond. All right, so we're going to kick off today's show talking about one of these natural wonders, but which one is it? I don't know. You're going to decide right now. So go ahead and grab your devices if you're playing along. Today is a choose your own adventure program. That means you get to decide what we talk about when we talk about it. So our first question coming up today is, what do you want to visit first? Do you want to go to Arbol del Tule, the widest tree in the world, Hierve el Agua, that boiling water site, or do you want to talk about cenotes? And those are your 3 options. So cenotes, Hierve el Agua, or Arbol del Tule. Alrighty, so we're starting with Arbol del Tule today, which is the widest tree in the world. Again, it's the widest, so it's not the tallest, and it's not the oldest, although it is a very old tree, but it is the widest single organism, widest as a tree in the world. So there are some trees around the world where there are actually 2 or 3 trees that are grown into each other, where the trunk is a little bit wider, but this is the widest single tree in the world. So let's go down on the ground back to the state of Oaxaca, and let's check out Arbol del Tule. All right, so Arbol del Tule is located in the town of Santa Maria del Tule, so it's named after the tree. And so this has a cathedral right beside the tree, so that gives you an idea of the size of this thing. So although I said earlier it's not the tallest tree in the world, it's still very, very tall. In fact, it's 137 feet tall. That's about 42 meters for anyone watching outside of the US. So 137 feet tall. So it is quite a large tree. And when you go up and walk up to the tree, there's a plaque with all kinds of neat fun facts on it, like how tall it is, how old is it. So right here on the plaque, they state it's 2,000 years old. We're going to say it's about 2,000 years old today. Some people guess that it's older, and some people actually guess that it's younger. But we're going to go with what the plaque says right beside the tree today at 2,000 years old, because there is a specific way we could get the exact age of the tree. So if any of you have ever counted tree rings before, we could cut it down and count every single tree ring, but they don't want to cut down the tree, right? So, but the best guess is today is going to be 2,000 years old. Remember, I said it is the widest tree in the world. So how wide is it? Well, if we take the diameter, so any of our younger classrooms that haven't learned this yet, so if we have a circle, the shape of a trunk of a tree, if we measure across the circle, that is called the diameter. So remember that for math class when you get older. All right, so it is 14.5 meters long in diameter. So that is 45 feet. So 45 feet across in diameter. So there you have it, the widest tree in the world. So when we look at it, it's impossible to get it all in one camera shot. So I had to put on this nifty wide angle lens to get it on. And so if we look at it here, if you walk all the way around the tree, so remember, if we measure across the tree, it's called a diameter. If you measure a circle all the way around the circle, that is called the circumference. So the circumference of the tree, if you take off walking one way and walk all the way back around to the other side, it's 190 feet in circumference. So it's a very wide tree. With a normal camera lens, look, this is all I could get in that shot. So let's check it out. One thing before we walk up closer to it is what type of tree is this? It's an evergreen tree or a coniferous tree. That means it drops cones, just like a pine tree would be a famous coniferous tree that you would be thinking of probably near most of your homes. This is a water cypress. This is a shot of those small, they're really tiny cones, which is kind of surprising with such a big tree, right? All right, so let's check it out. So as we saw there, it's a very large tree. It's very loud, so I kind of had to shut the volume down there. Lots of birds kind of hang out in the tree. I've been asked this a lot. I did not notice any mammals living in the trees like squirrels or anything else, probably because there's so many people around here. Now, a water cypress tree typically likes to be wet. It likes to be in a water type environment, wetlands, for example. Because of that, they have these sprinklers that are spraying. Why is it not located in wetlands? Well, what once was, but when the Spanish came to this part of the world and they started settling in this area, they drained out many of the swamps and wetlands located in this area. In fact, one of the old nicknames of this tree is Old Man in the Water, and is what it would translate to. And so when we look at it, when you visit here, you can't walk right up next to it. That's why you see a fence going all the way around. That prevents too many people from walking on the soil. So believe it or not, if you get enough people to walk around a tree, and if you notice this, if you go hiking near your home, for example, notice near a trail, and if a lot of people walk over a long period of time near trees, you can actually squish the ground. And what it does is it squishes the roots below the ground. And you can actually kill a tree just by having a bunch of people that comes to the same spot over and over and over. So that's why they keep you away from walking right up next to the tree there. And that is Arbol del Tule, the widest tree in the world. Now they have a festival every year. So maybe one of you in the audience will visit this area one day in Oaxaca and see Arbol del Tule. If you have the opportunity and you want to know when to come, well, I recommend you come the second Monday of October. Every year they have the Festival of Tule Trees. So it's the Festival of the Tule Tree. And again, that's the second Monday of every October is when they have it. So they'll have lots of fun festivities, food, music that they'll be playing at that tree. So a lot more will be going on if you visit then, if you have the option, that is. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open it up for some questions before we move to another spot. We'll start with our classroom on camera with us in Mrs. Hood's classroom. Again, a reminder, if you're watching from the outside, send your questions into that Q&A app built in your Zoom window or to hashtag GEOshow. All right, how you guys doing over in Pennsylvania? Any questions so far?
How many natural disasters happens around the tree?
Around the tree? Well, I can't tell you how many of them happen around the tree in particular. What I can talk about is Oaxaca, for example. So Mexico is located on the Ring of Fire. So the Ring of Fire is basically the area around the Pacific Ocean. And so this is an extremely active area for natural disasters, specifically volcanoes and earthquakes. In fact, 90% of all earthquakes in the world happen somewhere around the Ring of Fire. And about 3/4 of all volcanoes happen along the Ring of Fire. So this is an extremely active area in the world for natural disasters. And they do get a lot of earthquakes. There's been a few recently. I know last year, one of the big recent ones that hit Mexico City that was all in the news. Well, the epicenter was closer to Oaxaca. And so it was actually felt. The effects of that earthquake was actually felt all the way in Mexico City. So there are lots of natural disasters, specifically earthquakes. I don't know how many, though, off the top of my head. They happen pretty regularly in this part of the world. All right. Mrs. Donna's classroom wants to know, how much does the tree weigh? I don't know how much it weighs. And let's see, can they carbon date the tree? I imagine they could. I've seen where they've taken, where you can take, there are certain ways you can count the ages of a tree with, say, like core samples. And this is what they have written at the tree. So that's what we're going to go off of today. I think more reliable estimations that I have read have been actually a little bit younger. But most people are in agreement that it's definitely over 1,000 years old. But 2,000 is what we're going to go with today, about 2,000 years old. Great questions there. And did someone plant the tree? And coming from Mrs. Morgan's classroom. So possibly, but I would say no, it was a natural occurrence. So these cypress trees, they were in the wetlands in this area. And that one was saved primarily because it was the largest. And in fact, it even goes to much of the people, the indigenous people that lived in this area. Some people even claim that their people descended from these old cypress trees. So it would have been a very important tree. And often I get asked, what would happen if you cut this tree down? I would not recommend it. It is a protected tree. So I don't know if there's an exact particular law, but I guarantee you would be in trouble if you illegally were to go out and cut this tree down. All right, great questions coming in. We will definitely hit up Twitter on our next Q&A. And so if you're using there, don't feel bad. Your questions are coming up. But what we are going to do is we're going to head to another natural wonder and check it out so we can keep things moving along. And you guys are going to choose that second location for the day. So don't choose Arbol del Tule because we're not going back. All right, guys, here it goes. What do you want to learn about next? That was a close one, but we're going to head over to another part of Mexico. So we're going over to the Yucatan Peninsula. We're going to head over to the eastern part of southern Mexico and talk about cenotes. So cenotes are found in the Yucatan Peninsula. In fact, there's anywhere between, I've seen different estimates, but somewhere around 5,000 cenotes are located in or on the Yucatan. And there's 3 different kinds of cenotes. So there's open, semi-closed, and closed. The first type is called an open cenote. What's it called?
Open.
All right, open. So an open cenote is just how it sounds. It's open. It's open to the air. So just think of like a natural pool of water that's in the ground. In fact, you can think of like a sinkhole that you would find maybe, say, in Florida has lots of sinkholes as well. So here's an example of an open cenote. So this one is located near Chichen Itza, which is a very famous city of the Maya, Los Maya, and the open cenotes, or cenotes in general, were a source of fresh water for not only the Maya cities and civilizations in the past, but also for the Maya and Mexican people of today. There are no rivers in the Yucatan Peninsula. So all of the fresh water are found in these cenotes. This is an example, again, of an open cenote. And not only were they used for fresh water, but in the case of this one that's right in Chichen Itza, this was actually a ceremonial cenote. So this one, they've actually found artifacts and remains from sacrifices at the bottom of this cenote. So this one had a big cultural importance, not only of natural because of the fresh water. Okay, the next type of cenote is called a semi-closed. What's it called?
Semi-closed.
All right, semi-closed means it's partially closed and then it's partially open. So there is an opening to it. And we'll see a semi-closed cenote today. And we'll also see the last type, which is a closed cenote. So a closed cenote is just an underwater cave system or an underwater river system. The one we'll see today actually has a small hole opening in it, but is still considered a closed cenote. So let's check them out. And the cenotes, the majority of them are found on the eastern part of the peninsula. So a peninsula, again, is a piece of land that's surrounded by three sides of water, is what we see here. And on this area to the right is around 2,000 or so cenotes are found. About half of the cenotes are found in this area, in the Maya Rivera area. And most of these are underwater river systems. And that's what we're going to see today is an example of one of those. In fact, 7 of the top 10 longest underwater river systems in the world are found in the Yucatan. There's also another big area of cenotes that is located in the northern part of the peninsula, and that's an example that we just saw at Chichen Itza. Most of these are open cenotes, and there is a theory that these were caused because of the perfect semicircle shape. If you use your imagination, there would have been a perfect circle going around, that these were caused by the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs around 65 million years ago that hit the Gulf of Mexico, that would have rained down huge boulders of rock from the bottom of the ocean from that massive explosion that landed in a perfect perfect circle around the explosion, which would have been a semicircle on land here. And because of that, those heavy rocks sitting on top of that soft limestone with water eating it out below would have caused those deep open cenotes or deep sinkholes. And so that is one theory of how that's occurred. All right, so let's check them out. So the first one we're going to look at today is an open cenote. We're going to jump in the water, swim around, explore a little bit, and then pop out before we go on to another one. So I hope everyone brought their bathing suits today because we're about to get wet. So remember at the beginning, I told you that because of the limestone, there are underwater, not only freshwater underwater systems, but there's also underwater ways that connect the ocean to some of these cenotes. And this is an example of that. So this is a saltwater cenote. So all of the fish that we're going to see in here are all saltwater organisms, saltwater fish. So these are reef fish. And these cenotes provide a nursery for reef fish. So what they do is they'll come here as juveniles, and when they get larger, then they will go back out into the open ocean. What's really neat about them is they live in the roots of these big trees. Not only do fish make their way here, but birds that prey upon those juvenile fish come here as well. And when we look here, you see the juvenile fish to our left. They kind of hang out in these roots of these trees. But you may be asking yourself, wait a minute, if this is salt water, how are these trees living? A plant can't live in salt water. Well, you're kind of right and kind of wrong if you're thinking that, because these are actually called mangrove trees. Can you guys say mangrove?
Mangrove.
So a mangrove is a general term. So a mangrove is a term given to a tree or a shrub that is salt water tolerant. So they can't live on salt water, but what these do, these are actually red mangrove trees, and they actually filter out most of the salt. So they take about 90% of fresh water in. Most of the salt is filtered in their roots that don't go into the plant. The little bit of salt that does make it into the plant, they actually have sacrifice leaves. So they'll send that salt to one leaf, and then they drop the leaf. It's really cool adaptation of a plant, by the way. As we look at these roots, these are called prop and drop roots, and they kind of go out everywhere like fingers coming down from this tree. Again, this is called a red mangrove tree. These are also known as island builders. So not only do little juvenile fish live in there, but they'll also start collecting soil on sandbars in shallow water, and they'll build up islands. In fact, most of the Florida Keys are mangrove islands. What's really cool about the red mangrove, by the way, is let me go back to it because this is really cool. I know we're talking about mostly geological features today, but this red mangrove tree, as we see this cool bird up here, this red mangrove tree does not drop seeds, guys. So how do you think it reproduces? Well, this is actually a viviparous tree. So that's a huge science word. All that means is it gives live birth. What? That's right. This tree gives live birth. So it actually grows little what we call propagules, and it drops a living little red mangrove right off of that tree that floats in the ocean before it finds a place to take root and start growing. How cool is that? If you've never heard of it before, yes, there are trees that give live birth. All right, so another popular thing to do at these cenotes is scuba diving. So as we just saw our scuba divers down, we're going to be seeing them a lot today because cenotes are, especially this part of the world, people come here from all around the world to go scuba diving. It's a very, very, very famous place to come scuba diving. These open cenotes are a very safe environment to learn how to scuba dive because it's controlled, meaning there's not a lot of waves and turbulation like you would find out in the ocean environment. And if you come here to go cave diving, underwater cave diving, which is the most dangerous type of scuba diving, you want to learn in an open environment before going into a cave. So that's what these scuba divers are doing here. This is a great place to talk about open cenotes and closed cenotes because at one time, this was a closed cenote. So where my dash is up here would have been the roof of the cave, the closed cenote. You can see that those collapsed over time. They caved in. So what happens is how many of these cenotes are formed. Again, that limestone down here, when the water runs under here, it dissolves many of the minerals from that stone. So it makes it weak. And over time, that roof will collapse in on itself and make an open cenote when it once was a closed cenote. All right, so we're going to go ahead and head out of the open cenote, and we're going to go and check out the other two types of cenotes. And as we do that, we'll see our scuba divers there. Just out of curiosity, anyone here ever been scuba diving? No? Does anyone want to go scuba diving?
Yes.
All right. So it's one of my favorite things to do, but I will caution you that you need a lot of training to go scuba diving because it can be dangerous, especially if you are not following safety protocols. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at two of the other types of cenotes, which are semi-closed and closed. If you remember on the map, I pointed out to you dos ojos. So dos ojos. So if I put two circles in here, what we're doing is we're looking at a map of the waterway of these cenotes. But if we were to look at it from the sky, it actually looks like two holes in the trees. And for a classroom that's with us, do you guys study Spanish? Do you know what's dos mean? Two. Does anyone know what ojo means? Eyes. All right. So dos ojos is what? Two eyes. There we go. So if you look at it from the sky in the farce, it looks like two eyes. So they're basically two cenotes, but they are connected. They're connected by an underwater passageway or an underwater cave. So we're going to see some scuba divers actually going back and forth between this underwater cave. We're going to enter in on our top right, and we're going to swim around. And we're going to go underwater ourselves a little bit into a closed cenote. So up here on the left, this is called the Bat Caves. And I'll give you, you can make a guess of why that is called the Bat Caves. All right, so a couple of vocabulary words that we're going to learn because we're going to see some underground rock formations. So these are common in caves all over the world. And but so if you ever go caving, for example, or come to a cenote, you'll know what these are. So our first one today is called a stalactite. Can you say stalactite?
Stalactite.
Okay, the second one is called a stalagmite. Can you say stalagmite?
Mite.
All right. And the last one is called a column. What's it called?
Column.
Okay, so these three are related to each other, and let's see how that works. So a stalactite, what happens is what we're going to see even at our next stop at Yerve El Agua is earlier I was mentioning that minerals in rock. So if you're not familiar, minerals they're like the ingredients of rocks. So if you like cookies, for example, chocolate chips, sugar, flour, these are all different ingredients of cookies. So if you use different ingredients, you get different kinds of cookies. Same thing with rocks. You use different minerals, you get different kinds of rocks. And what happens in limestone has a mineral called calcium in it. And what happens is water dissolves the calcium. So it's like sugar water or salt water. You don't see it in there, but it's in that water. And as the water comes down and drips from this stalactite, it leaves behind a little bit of calcium. Just a little bit, the tiniest little bit. But what happens is over years and years and years, it grows into what looks kind of like an icicle, but it's not ice. This is actually hard rock. They don't grow very fast. They only grow about 1/4 of an inch to an inch every 100 years. So it just depends on how much water is dripping down. If it's a little bit, it's going to grow slower. If it's a lot, it's going to grow faster. Well, what happens when it hits the floor? Well, the reverse happens. So as that water drips down and hits the floor, they form a stalagmite. So instead of an icicle shape coming down, it's a shape that is growing up towards the ceiling. And over a long, long time, what will happen is those two will connect because a stalagmite will grow up at the bottom of a stalactite because water drips straight down. Over time, it will connect and it will form a column when it was connected. All right, so these two words are similar, but the way I have a little trick for everyone, it has this word in it, mite. I like to think of little bugs crawling on the ground. So that's what I think of. So if you just listen for that word mite, and that's a key for we're talking about the formation that grows from the floor up, not the one that grows from the ceiling down. Okay. All right. So let's do it, guys. Let's go ahead and visit Dos Ojos. So again, this one is a semi-closed cenote. We see that right here is partially open, but mostly closed. All right, so let's walk to the edge and we're going to jump in the water here. Woo, all right, that's a little chilly. The water's about 77 degrees here. This is fresh water. So unlike our past cenote, this one's fresh water, not salt water. And as we go around, we're going to start seeing that number one, it's dark, so we have to use a flashlight. And we'll start to see some of these rock formations that we just learned about. So from the ceilings, you can see those stalactites dripping down. And you even see them below water from time to time. So as we see up above, right here, this is a stalactite, but wait a minute, it's below water. And you may ask yourself, GOB, you said it happens because water is dripping down and you can't pour water out of a glass underwater, right? You can't drip things underwater. You can't shoot a water pistol underwater. Well, yeah, but at one time this was not underwater. So at one time this was a dry cave, but now this is a wet cave. So this stalactite has stopped growing, but it was formed when it was a dry cave. All right, so as we're swimming around, we're going to make our way over to the bat cave. Now on the way there, we're going to see some more scuba divers. So remember, scuba divers that would practice in those open cenotes, well, they would come next to a place like this, Dos Ojos, to practice in a closed environment. And this is where the next level of cave diving comes in. As we see our scuba divers, it's going to be coming up after our little fish. Here's some columns below water as well. So there's those scuba divers, and they are actually swimming back and forth between the two eyes. Remember that underwater cave I told you about? And one thing you'll see here, this is just interesting to talk about because it's related here, is in scuba diving, especially underwater cave diving, again, it's the most dangerous type of diving because what happens if something goes wrong, right? If you're completely under the water, you can't just come to the surface. And if you're completely in an underwater cave. And many times it's not clear water. So that's why this is a popular place to come come learn how to cave dive is because the water that's in these cenotes are typically very clear and you have lots of visibility. But the way you navigate in a cave is you use these lines. So someone will put a line out, and what you do, how you use this is you kind of like you make a okay sign with your fingers. And so you know how you make an okay sign, blah, blah, blah. I know you guys are all jealous of my artistic abilities, right? All right, so what you do is you make an O of an okay, and what you do is you make that O around that string. And if you never break that O, if you always keep that O closed, then you will always be going where the string is going. So that is how you navigate. That's like your underwater GPS navigation if you are a cave diver. All right, so here's some more underwater. Remember when the two formations connect, it's called a column. And we're actually going to go underwater ourselves a little bit and enter into the Bat Cave. So now we're in the Bat Cave. If you look up at the top, there's a hole in the top of the cave, but for the most part, it is closed. And if you follow this light over here to the right, follow my light with your eyes, and you'll see why maybe this is called a Bat Cave. All right, do you guys see why it's called a bat cave? All right, so we see bats there, okay? And don't worry, these aren't the bats that suck blood or anything like a vampire. And, you know, these are fruit bats. And but what they do is when they come back to the caves, sometimes they'll bring fruit and they drop, when they're eating food, they drop crumbs just like you and I drop crumbs when we eat. But they also drop something else. And that is when they go to the bathroom, they're bat droppings. And if anyone knows what the super fancy scientific word of bat droppings are, it's called guano. All right. So if we look at the guano that's on this wooden dock here, when we go across and we see someone, as in me, left their snorkel right down there. So if anyone has ever been snorkeling before, you know that that part right there goes into your mouth. So that's right, I put my mouthpiece on top of bat guano. You're welcome, guys. That's what I do for you. All right, anyway, so the reason I tell you all this, that's kind of a funny joke, but the reason I'm telling you this is because often I get asked of how do these little fish live? We don't see any kind of food or sources of food in here. So when we see fish in here, these are freshwater fish, unlike the first cenote we went to. There we go. They survive from help from the bats. All right. So, and the reason they can survive by help from the bats is something called symbiosis. Can you guys say symbiosis? Symbiosis. Okay, that's a big, another big science word, maybe for some of our younger classrooms. But the way it works is sometimes you have two organisms, so two living things living together and helping each other out. One is happy and the other one is happy. Well, there's other kinds of symbiosis. Sometimes one is happy and one doesn't care. And that's what this one is. The bats really don't care about the fish. It doesn't hurt them. It doesn't help them. But the fish are happy because of the bats. And another type is one is happy and one is sad. In this case, if anyone here, I know you guys from Pennsylvania, anyone here ever had a tick before?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Were you happy?
No.
Was that tick happy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is symbiosis. So that is, they're called a parasite. So that's the type of relationship that is. So you were actually getting hurt by that tick, but that tick was getting food from you. And another great example of this would be if anyone is a fan of Finding Nemo out there, when we know that Nemo, that little clownfish, lives in a sea anemone. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for some questions about cenotes or Arbor del Tule, whatever you have. So make sure you get those sent in. And let's see. Are these trees only in cenotes? Coming from Mrs. Sanchez's classroom. So no, red mangroves. I've seen red mangroves all over the world. I've seen them in Southeast Asia. I've seen them in the Florida Keys. So red mangroves are actually pretty widespread. And there are many different types of mangroves. You won't find them in the U.S. really any further north than, say, maybe Jacksonville. But most of them are going to be in South Florida. Yeah, they like warm environments. Okay, let's see. Mrs. Morgan's classroom. How old is Del Soho? I don't know the age of that underwater system. Here's why I know about that underwater system. It is a larger underwater river, what we were just swimming in. And in fact, it's somewhere around 198 miles, that underwater river system. And at its deepest point is 391 feet deep. And some of these underwater systems were actually connected into the Caribbean Sea. So the Maya people, there are cases where the Maya people could go out fishing in the ocean, and there are areas where these underwater freshwater river systems were dumping out, going below ground and running deep below ground, and then bubbling up underwater in the ocean. So there are places in the Caribbean where these freshwater upwellings, so there's a place where you can go and there's fresh water because it pushes all the salt water out to the side, and fresh water is bubbling up right there. And the Maya found these. And so yeah, it's a great combination there of fresh water and salt water and how that interacts. Let's go over to Mrs. Hood's classroom. Do you guys have a question for us?
Can closed cenotes still become an open cenote?
Yeah, and that's like the open cenote that we saw, where just like the stalactites and the stalagmites are being formed, also with those underwater cave systems, they're getting larger and larger and larger. So these underwater caves, that water is dissolving minerals, dissolving limestone, and so it's making those underwater passages bigger and grander. And so what happens at a certain point in time, when the ceiling gets too heavy for the sides to support, it will collapse in. Now, it doesn't mean all of them will become an open cenote, but it is possible that if it is shallow enough and given enough time, that one day it will be. Let's see, what are the largest animals living in cenotes? Over on Twitter, we have a question. The largest animals that I personally observed were in the open cenotes, some of the saltwater fish that are living in there. But large animals rely on the cenotes. So not only people, but also animals from the jungles like jaguars rely on cenotes for fresh water as well. So in a way, that would be a large animal that is relying on there as well. All right, so because we're getting a little short on time, we're going to head over to Mrs. Sanchez's classroom. Wants to know how many different kinds of mangroves are there. I want to say, it's been a while since I looked it up. I want to say there's around 50 or 60 different species of mangroves. Again, mangrove is a general term giving to any plant or any shrub or tree that is saltwater tolerant. In the U.S., there are 3 mangrove trees. There's the red mangrove, the black mangrove, and the white mangrove. And my favorite is the red, which we've seen here. And let's go over, and we're going to go back to Oaxaca now and talk about Yerbe el Agua, also known as boiling water. So we'll learn, why is it called boiling water over at Yerbe el Agua. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hike down to a cliff. So we park kind of off in the distance that way, and we're going to walk down to the top of this cliff. So what we're looking at is illustration of the white areas, the top of a cliff, and all this brown area down here is the bottom of the cliff. So what we're going to see on this cliff is we're going to see some freshwater springs. So we'll talk about what those are, where the stars are, and we'll also see there's man-made and both natural and man-made pools. And so what happens is when water bubbles up out of the ground in these from these springs, they get trapped in some of these pools, and then they pour over the edge of the pool and pour over the edge of another pool and pour over the edge of another pool. And so eventually it runs down the side of the cliffs. And because of that, the water here has minerals that are dissolved in it as well, just like we saw in our cave systems. So they leave behind, in this case is calcium again, and they leave behind minerals primarily, and those minerals create rock formations. So these are going to be a little bit different than the icicle looking stalactites that we saw earlier in the stalagmites. And so if you're asking yourself, how does this process work? Well, it's just like if anyone here has ever been swimming at the ocean, if you go in salt water, so water can dissolve solids, right? So you can dissolve salt into water. Anyone ever made Kool-Aid, right? Or sugar water? That's what's happening is you're dissolving solids into a liquid, into a water. The same thing can happen with rocks. So water running through rocks underground can dissolve minerals. And what happens, just like when you go swimming at the ocean, you go swimming in the ocean, it feels like glorious water. You get out, you go lay on your towel. When your skin and the hot sun dries that water off your skin, it leaves behind all that gritty salt. That's why you have to take a shower when you leave the beach, and the sand, but also the salt. And that salt gets left behind. Same thing happens here. So when that water bubbles up out of the ground, it has minerals dissolved into it. So when that water evaporates, it leaves those minerals behind. And that's what we're going to see here with these formations that were made here at Yerbe El Agua. All right, so let's go back and check it out. Abracadabra, we are now back in Oaxaca in our magic school bus heading to Yerbe El Agua. Now, we need to pay a small fee to get in here, and to do so, as we're doing so, a local farmer is walking by with some livestock. If you see off in the distance, it's a very hot, dry area of the world, and which is going to have a very unique look to this natural wonder, because when we look at Yerbe El Agua right here, it looks like a frozen waterfall, but it's not a frozen waterfall. That is actually hard rock that we are looking at. And it is actually wet to us continuously. It's constantly building and building and building, and with each little bit of mineral that gets left behind. So what happens here, now we're on top of the cliff, right of that big rock formation that we were just looking at. So we see large pools here that people come to go swimming in. So not only is it a beautiful area to come and take pictures of, but it's also a place to come and take a dip. And as we learned that it's called boiling water, we'll see why it's called boiling water, but it's not really hot. The water's not boiling. It's actually quite cool because it's groundwater. So groundwater is actually cool. So as we see here, that you can see why it gets the name boiling water, that water that has that bubbling effect. The reason it bubbles is because of the pressure of the water coming up from below ground is just, it's more of the pressure making it bubble, not heat that's making it bubble. So here's another of the formations, so not as big as the one that we are standing on top of. But what happens is as the water here, whereas it comes out of the springs and it goes, as we saw it bubbling out of the ground, well, these are the natural pools. So it will go in this little puddle and go in this little puddle until eventually it gets to the edge. And what happens is as it runs down the side of the cliff, all along its journey, as water on the edge of where it's pouring over and trickling down dries up, it's leaving back just a little bit of mineral each time. So over thousands of years, it can make a very large formation. So these are the natural pools. Those are typically small. These larger ones are man-made. Like this is a man-made pool. And the way they do that is it's just like a beaver makes a dam. So they just make it, the people that did it just dammed up the water, and that's what caused that larger pool. So we see right here the small wall that was built. So as we pan across, you can see it's quite a beautiful area with what looks like a frozen waterfall with a backdrop of very dry rolling hilled mountains, and very beautiful area. So this is a man-made pool, and again, so the way they would do this is you would build, say, a brick or cinder block. I don't know what material they use, but it's probably cinder block wall, and as the water pours over, it actually left calcium on top of the wall. So even though it looks natural, we can tell with these really straight perpendicular walls, that's a man-made pool right there. These are the natural pools. So this is what typically happens on top of the cliffs here. So as water will pull up into a little pool, it will trickle over to another one. It naturally builds up these little walls in that process, but it's not going to build up as large of a pool as we saw people swimming in. All right, and like with anything around the world, anywhere we go and we explore explorers, we always want to be as safe as we can. Just remember, when you go to areas around the world, sometimes there are no safety railings or anything like that. So you want to be very safe as you're walking around. Don't get too close to the edges of cliffs. And also because the top of the cliff is wet, so it's actually slick. So you need to watch your step and stay, give yourself plenty of space as we look out over at our rock formations. And lots of people come here, and there's a class actually taking their class photos, as we just saw there. Okay, so we're just past 45 minutes, so we're going to jump right into our Geo quiz for our classrooms that need to go ahead and head out. You can head out at any time on the Geo. It's a, make this fit you guys. But I will stay on after our quiz to open up our Q&A, and I'll answer as many questions as I can in the lightning round. And so if you have time to stick around, stick around. If not, have a great day. But we're going to go ahead and jump right into our Geo quiz. So if you have Kahoot and you're playing along, go ahead and grab your devices. Don't forget, every question from here on out is worth points. And the quicker you answer correctly, the more points you will be awarded. Good luck, explorers. All right, first question. What is the name of the cave formation that drips from the ceilings in caves? Is it stalagmite, column, or stalactite? All right, it is stalactites. Witty Owl jumps out to the lead. How old is the tree, Arbor del Tule? Is it 100, 2,000, 200, or 1,000 years old? All right, it's about 2,000 years old. Wise Shark takes the lead, followed by Noble Dolphin. Next question. Is the boiling water, Hierve el Agua, really hot? Is it really hot? All right, no, it's not really hot. Quite cool, actually. Noble Dolphin is in the lead. What kinds of cenotes are there? Are there closed, semi-closed, open, or open-closed and semi-closed cenotes? All right, all of them. Wise Shark takes the lead back. Which Mexican state is Hierve el Agua and Arbor del Tule located in? Is it the state of red Oaxaca, blue Chiapas, yellow Chihuahua, or green the Yucatan? All right, it is Oaxaca. And today's winner is dun, 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 Glad Owl. Good job, Glad Owl. If you're a Glad Owls teacher, please make sure you give me your school address. You can do that in one place and one place only. That's over at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. Learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. That URL is located in the bottom of your screen right about meow. So go over there, fill out that Google form, and I'll get that postcard sent right out to Wise Owl. All right, so if you have time to stick around to keep asking questions, I'm gonna open up the floor right about now and start answering those. So can semi-closed cenotes become closed cenotes? So the other way around, coming from Mrs. Morgan's classroom. I would assume so. If it, something would have to close it off. I think typically it goes the other way around, but yeah, I mean, if there's an earthquake or shift or something happens where maybe the edge collapses down and closes off, yeah, it could become a closed cenote. All right, let's go over to Pennsylvania. Do you guys have another question for us? No. Okay. Okay, go for it.
Can open cenotes turn into closed cenotes?
Right, so I think it would be pretty hard for an open cenote to become a closed cenote, because an open is it's very open. It's like if you have a swimming pool, right? So no amount of you would have to physically, like humans would have to build a dome over top of an open one. So I wouldn't see an open one becoming closed. Great question though. Over on, no new ones over on Twitter there. So let's see, on our Q&A app, we have, how large can fish get in the closed cenotes coming from Mrs. Sanchez's classroom. The only ones that I personally saw were little ones. There aren't a lot of, at least from what I could observe, a lot of food sources in those, at least in Dos Ojos. There may be, but I only saw little fish in there. If there are larger ones, I did not see them. Okay, let's go back over to Mrs. Hood's class. Looks like we had another question. Go for it.
How deep were the roots for the largest tree or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know how deep the roots go. Yeah, as far as the Árbol del Tule, yeah, I don't know if it's been measured. Maybe it has. I have not come across that information. And if I find that, I'll research it and see if I can find it. If I can find it, I'll put it at over at Flipgrid for you guys. How deep roots? All right. Okay, great question. And we also have coming in, how many bats live in the bat cave? There were a lot in there. I did not count all of the bats in there. And so yeah, there were definitely a lot. I can tell you that. But there, you know, it's kind of a smaller cave, so it wasn't like if you've ever seen on like the Discovery Channel or National Geographic, those huge caves where just thousands and thousands of bats are flying out of the caves. It's not that many in this one particular one. Okay, let's go back over to Pennsylvania. Go for it.
How many kinds of fish are there in the cenotes?
In the cenotes? Yeah, I don't know about how many different kinds. I can tell you there are, if we talk about the open cenotes, for example, that are connected to salt water, those are a lot of juvenile reef fishes. And so when we're talking about Caribbean reefs, coral reefs, I mean, there are numerous amounts of different species of fish. So there were a lot. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could tell you off the top of my head, just in that one cenote, there were at least probably 15 different species of juvenile fish that we could visually verify. But yeah, I don't know, like I would imagine that any species could grow up there in these open cenotes. So it would be hard to put a number on how many are actually in one at any given time. And are there any cenotes on the tops of mountains? No. And because in this case, often get asked, so are there cenotes in other parts of the world, for example? So cenotes are basically the local, I mean, comes from the Maya language. So they're it's the local name for these basically sinkholes in underwater river systems. So there are underwater river systems and there are sinkholes found in other parts of the world. And both of those, you typically are not going to find them up in mountains. And partially because when we're talking about water and the water cycle and where water typically goes, in mountains, that water is running off into rivers. You typically don't have a big source of groundwater, which is what this is tapping into. And so it's usually lower areas. All righty. So we are coming up and I have to go for another program. So I want to thank everyone. Thanks for coming along with us to Southern Mexico. Don't forget that there are many natural wonders out there, and use this opportunity to get pumped up and go see Mexico for yourself. It's a fabulous country and one of my favorite places to go visit. Until next time, I'm GOB. You've been watching the Geo Show, and goodbye, explorers.